Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the much requested video, how to make lo-fi rave techno in the style of skin on skin and mall grab. As you guys can see, I'm in my old studio again today for the next few days. I will be. And yeah, as usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets. Everything from this video is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And let's dive in. So, we're at 130 BPM. The first sound here is the kick, which sounds like this. So this is your pretty standard, big, boomy, 909 style techno kick. What makes this one unique is, one, it's not a rumble kick. Of course, a lot of times when we think of a techno kick, we think of like rumble kicks. This is not a rumble kick, it's just a doom, doom, doom. But also, it's actually being low passed a bit. If you look at this, you can see we've got the filter frequency there. And I have a little bit of an envelope on it to give it a little bit more attack. But yeah, this is something that I picked up on, like listening to these tracks. It's essentially like, to make this really lo-fi techno kick, it's just a super booming 909 kick, and then you're kind of making it a bit deeper with the low-pass filter. And then after that, we have some drum bus. And usually, these days, actually, I try to keep the kicks a little bit cleaner and just turn them up really loud to make them really fat sounding. But drum bus is actually the best way for this because, this style is all about giving it texture and kind of adding some character to your sounds. And if you just use, like, your dry kick, especially if it's like a 909 kick or something like that, you're really not going to get that, kind of boomy, saturation feel. And so this is really good for that. It just makes that kick super huge. You can see I've got the transients turned up a little bit. And then we have the bass. So this is the MIDI for the bass line. This is the MIDI for the 808. So it's essentially two layers. We have an 808 and then this re-space over top of it. They're both playing the same notes. It's just the 808 has those extra notes thrown in. But you can see it's actually not the craziest chord progression. We're basically going. So, if you look at it that way, it's a pretty straightforward chord progression, but then it's all these little bouncy notes that come into it. Now, the thing about this is that the bouncy notes can seem kind of, easy to lose or, just kind of hard to find, really. But all it is it's just notes inside of the scale. It's just, we're in this A sharp minor scale. That's the key we're in. So, for example, C sharp, it's just the minor third. F is just the fifth. This, the G sharp down here, again, that's right in the chord progression. So, it's actually pretty simple once you break it down. It's just the way that it fits into the track. And then also keeping in mind, you're hearing this also playing off of, a pad. And this lead. So it's all that musical content coming together. Now, for the sound, like I said, this is two layers. So we have this drill 808. And that's essentially, a lot of people have been asking how to make the quote-unquote tom bass that you hear in a lot of tracks from these guys. This is it. It's just an 808, either a trap 808 or a drill 808 if you're from the UK. And, just taking that really, really fat sound. And what happens is you can see it actually in the sound. It has an attack at the start. That's essentially what an 808 sound is. It's a bass with a punch at the start. So that's what's creating that tom. And when you hear it with the kick, you actually get a really nice groove. But because it's this 808, which is more long and held out, it's not your standard, usually a tom bass would sound like this. It would be super short like that. This gives you both the punchy bass and the length. And then for the re-space, so you can see that's just playing single notes. We don't have the extra 16th notes on that one. And this is just a pretty straightforward wavetable patch where you can see we have the sub as well as the saw wave, and then they're just going into a low pass filter, and then I have the unison on. And I also have a high pass filter here because you really just want the 808 to be the low end. This is just kind of sitting on top to add some nice just sonic texture. And it also makes the bass more audible too, because if you just have the 808, you can really feel the bass line, but you can't really hear it so much. When you add in this respace, you can hear this now. Like if you're on phone speakers, if I take out the respace, you might not be able to hear the bass as well, but then if I turn it on, so it's all about just playing around like that and then keeping it controlled with the filtering and EQ. Now, on the group of basses, we have a few things which are really just kind of like gluing them together. You can see we have some drum busts to make these a bit fatter together. There's without that. And then with it. We have a compressor, just sidechaining it to the kick. You know, makes it fit into the mix a little bit better, and also gives it a bit more rhythm, because you're also getting that quarter note like pulse. And then we have an EQ8, which this is just cutting at 100 hertz, boosting the lows a little bit, so it's really just making a little bit of room for the kick. And yeah, that's the bass. Then we have this pad. So this is playing this pretty simple melody. It's essentially just, you know, notes inside of that A sharp minor scale, like I was telling you that's the key we're in. And then just kind of like adding some nice musical background to the chord progression. Like it's not exactly following the chord progression, but it's moving kind of at the same time. So you can see like when that note changes there, it's in the bass line as well. Same deal like over here. So, you know, just kind of adding some nice background musical stuff to kind of fill out the track a little bit and accentuate the chord progression. And when you're trying to write something like this, again, like it's not that hard if you know the scale you're in. If you're in, like for example, we're in A sharp minor, you just use notes from A sharp minor and then just get creative, like with how they kind of relate to the bass notes. Like how these, that's kind of creating a nice chord there. And then it goes down one. You know, it's just those little subtle things you can do to really make it fit into the track well. And for the sound, this is made with wavetable, so this is just a saw wave with a little bit of a low-pass filter, and then some unison. So the pad is going to be pretty simple, you know. Just a nice fat, super saw style pad. It's really just about preserving that, rather than like making some crazy sound with like, you know, bringing super saws into the future somehow. It's more about kind of getting that more like classic super saw trancey sound. And this, we just have a bit of echo and reverb as well to give it some space. A bit of drum bus, which does actually fatten it up, and it helps to kind of give it more of that crunchy, kind of more lo-fi analog feel. And then we just have a compressor sidechaining it to the kick, and a high-pass filter getting rid of the low end so it won't get in the way of the bass. And then we have this trance lead. So this is actually another simple lead just using the A sharp minor scale, like I've been saying. Then you can see with this one, we're using really just four main voices. So we have the root note, we have the fourth, we have the fifth, we have the minor sixth, and then we just have another root note up here. So it's only actually 4 like notes total. But then it's all about how you can play with those. And in particular, like these 3 notes, you know, like the relationship between those can be very powerful. So it's really just like getting the most mileage out of those notes that are really close together, rather than like trying to make this crazy arp that's like every single note in the scale and doing all the stuff. Because if you have less notes, it's easier for people to remember your track because you're throwing less stuff at their brain. And this is just really repetitive. This kind of drones on over top of the chord progression. And it's all about how that sounds with the trance lead staying in the same place, but then the bass changing so much. Now, for the sound on this one, this is made with analog. So you can see we have a square wave and a saw wave. On the square wave, we have a bit of pulse width modulation. I have the LFO on that, so it's being like constantly moved. And then we have a low pass filter with a bit of an envelope. I also have a little bit of an LFO on the filter. You can hear that, just kind of gives it some more movement, you know, makes it a little bit more unique. With the envelope set like this. And the last thing that we have inside the synth here is you can see we have quite a bit of vibrato. You know, it just gives it a lot of texture and makes it feel really lively. And then we also have this unison, which just kind of gives it more of that super saw type of feel. And then we have a bit of echo and some reverb, which just give it the space. Some more drum bus on this one, you can hear that a lot, like. This one's all about sounding kind of crunchy like that, and not just being like super dry, but like hearing everything kind of crunch together, including the reverb and the echo. And then we just have a bit of compression, sidechaining into the kick, and a high-pass filter. And that's it for the trance lead. And then these next thing down here are the 909 hi-hats. They're pretty straightforward stuff, but I've heard these in almost all of the techno tracks from both of these guys. Like, they love the 909 hi-hats, you know, you just have like that. Like, you've heard this feel before at the beginning of a track, right? Yeah, the 909 hi-hats are just really good and fat and really full sounding, and they have like a kind of more retro feel, which I think goes well with the lo-fi techno aesthetic. And yeah, then after that we have the shaker, which you can see actually just kind of fills in some of the notes. So it's really just accentuating what the closed hi-hat's doing, but you can hear by having something do that, you know, it just kind of like makes those notes that much more exciting, essentially. Then we have this little 808 hi-hat, which you can hear, this is just kind of playing like almost like randomly, you know, it's not necessarily just the whole time. It's in different places, but what this does is it kind of adds something a little bit more lively to the drums, because if we turn this off, everything is very rigid. You know, it's all just kind of the same thing over and over. When you add this one thing in, all of a sudden, you just have something in the background which is kind of bouncing around. It's got a little bit of an interesting thing going on where it's being sidechained to the kick as well, so you're kind of getting some more movement from that and some more rhythm. So this is just kind of adding some liveliness to the drums. And this is something that's easy to overlook, but it's important. If you miss this, your track is going to be missing something that you may not always be able to put your finger on, but it's just going to sound off. And then the last drum down here is this rim shot. So you can hear that just sits on the 2 and the 4 really nicely, you know, without it. It's a little bit more kind of like deep techno, I feel like. This gives it like that more interesting groove. And yeah, so that is it for the percussion. You can see on the group there, I just have a bit of drum bush, just with a bit of saturation, a little bit of compression going on as well. You know, it just kind of makes everything feel a little bit more lo-fi. I wouldn't normally do this to all the percussion at once, but it just kind of like makes everything feel a bit more ravey and crunchy and lo-fi, and yeah. So that is it for the percussion, and that is also going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything that you see right here is available right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp for just $5. It's a great way to support me if you guys are enjoying these videos. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.